I now give the floor to the Syrian Arab Republic.
Shukran.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the Council holds a session today to discuss the political situation in the Syrian Arab Republic, and tomorrow the Council will hold another session on the humanitarian situation. A few days ago, it held a session on the situation in the Middle East. Some have also tackled, in a selective and biased manner, the situation in Syria. And at the beginning of every month, the Council holds a session on what is called the chemical dossier. This begs the question: is the Council really discussing during those monthly sessions the situation in Syria? Or has it just become a platform for some countries to repeat unfounded allegations and accusations against the government of Syria, trying to tarnish it? What does it mean that the Council holds all these sessions and does not hold one emergency session to condemn the repeated Israeli infringements on Syrian sovereignty, or to condemn the practices of the US or Turkish occupation forces? Why doesn't the Council move to adopt a press statement or presidential statement that clearly and unequivocally condemn all those violations of international law and the provisions of the UN Charter? Doesn't all those repeated and gross and continuing violations deserve that the Council dedicate even one session to prove to the Syrian people and the international public opinion that it is shouldering its responsibility in line with the Charter and that it is addressing seriously these dangerous threats to international peace and security? What happened and is still happening now in Al-Hasaka requires the immediate attention of the Security Council to look into the repercussions of these dangerous incidents caused by the crimes of the terrorist ISIL group and the separatist militia of Qassad and the US occupation forces. It's also a result of the insistence of the governments of certain countries not to shoulder its responsibilities and repatriate their own citizens, the foreign terrorist fighters and their families detained in camps and detention centers northeast Syria, prosecuting them and rehabilitating them on their own territories so that they can put an end finally to their presence on Syrian territories and terminate the illegitimate presence of US forces on Syrian soil. My delegation reiterates that any discussion of the situation of my country will be limited and a waste of time so long as the attempts of certain Western countries continue to cover up the real challenges facing Syria and their attempts to deviate attention away from the aggressive practices that exacerbate the situation and lead to catastrophic consequences on the lives of each Syrian. Madam President, we have listened to the briefing of the Special Envoy Geir Pedersen and the statements of the colleagues, the representatives of the member states in the Council. On our part, would like to stress that the Syrian Arab Republic is committed to the political solution based on a Syrian-led, Syrian-owned, intra-Syrian national dialogue that would meet the aspirations of the Syrian people and ensure the full respect of Syria's sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity. Thus, the government of Syria facilitated the launch of the work of the Constitutional Committee, and it's following up its work with all interest, even though it recognizes the obstructing role played by the Turkish regime and the representatives and some Western countries who have no interest in the success of the work of this committee. Syria underlines the need for the Special Envoy to abide by his role as a facilitator and that he must work on implementing the provisions of the terms of reference agreed between parties without interfering in the substantive dialogue between members of the committee. He should convey the developments objectively and in a neutral manner. Syria looks forward for the 7th session of the Constitutional Committee. Would like to commend the positive and constructive engagement of the national delegation over the previous 6 sessions and their proposals that reflect the aspirations of the Syrians. We also stress that we reject any foreign interference in the work of this committee, any attempts at obstructing it, or any attempt at imposing artificial timetables or predetermined outcomes, or any attempt to overrun the provisions of the agreed-upon terms of reference under any pretexts. Madam President, the Syrian Arab Republic stresses that it is unacceptable to continue disregarding the dangerous violations of its sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, which have been provided for in all relevant Security Council resolutions, or turning a blind eye to the major challenges that face the improvement of the humanitarian situation of the Syrian people due to the unilateral coercive measures imposed on it, which are in total contradiction to the interest of the Syrian people, which some pretend that they care for. We would like to stress that the Security Council must act firmly and swiftly to, first, ensure the respect of its resolutions and other UN resolutions on the occupied Syrian Golan, and ensure the implementation of such resolutions to put an end to the Israeli occupation and counter any Israeli schemes aimed at building thousands of new settlements in Golan and doubling the number of settlers living there. They must compel Israel, the occupying power, to put an end to its repetitive hysterical attacks against the territories of the Syrian Arab Republic and hold it accountable for such attacks. Second, put an end to the Turkish occupation of Syrian territories in the north and northwest of the country, and put an end to the crimes of the Turkish regime and its practices based on sponsoring terrorism, spreading chaos and destruction, the Turkmenization, the forced migration, the demographic alteration and the looting of economic resources and properties, and the use of potable water as a tool of war against millions of Syrians. They must be held accountable for that. Third, put an end to the illegitimate presence of the U.S. forces in northeast Syria and the southwest of the country, and put an end to sponsoring the separatist Qased militia and other terrorist entities مثل معاولة الثورة in the Tanf and the Rukban, and put an end to the looting and smuggling of national treasures, especially after what we've seen in El Hasek over the past few days, and the terrorist attack by Daesh and the massacres by Qased against the innocents, and the barbaric destruction of the infrastructure by the American Air Forces that led to the killing of many civilians. It also forced thousands of families to leave their homes seeking a safe haven. All of these are American attempts to recycle the terrorist ISIL movement and finding a pretext for the U.S. forces to remain in the region, especially in light of the increasing domestic and international demands for the exit from Syrian territories. Fourth, put an end to the economic terrorist policies and collective punishment through the inhumane, illegitimate, and immoral unilateral coercive measures imposed by the USA and the EU on the Syrian people. It has had catastrophic impact on all aspects of daily life of Syrians, especially in light of the spread of COVID-19 pandemic and the extreme climate change, which was coupled by drought, lack of rains, and extreme cold during this winter season. Fifth, implementing all resolutions on countering terrorism and ensuring its respect, and supporting all the efforts of the Syrian government and its allies to eradicate the remains of any terrorist groups in Syria, like ISIL and the Nusra Front and others, and hold all those sponsors of such terrorist organizations accountable to such violations. To conclude, Madam President, the responsibility of the Security Council to maintain international peace and security requires it to act swiftly to counter any violations of the UN Charter and deter any violations of its resolutions. It has to address the issues under its considerations objectively and with neutrality, including preventing its use by some countries as a platform to target other UN member states. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic and